Chapter 2, An Accumulated Pile of Usefulness. An accumulated pile of usefulness. Fuck. It was a very little fuck. Junior Administrator Hedgewish, not sure how to pronounce that. Neither was she, whispered the little fuck into the fuck bag she kept under her desk. Language, drugs, alcohol, blasphemy, insubordination, lack of zeal, carelessness, sloth, video games, social media, sexual conduct, het or otherwise, onanism, indecent self-photography, gambling, stock trading, prohibited. Hedgewish could survive without the other stuff, but sometimes she had to say fuck or die. Luckily this shit paid, and it paid a price to slit throats for, that being grief cubes. Hedgewish hadn't prowled the streets 7 months running, and as long as this city held she wouldn't again. However, the message that prompted her surreptitious expletive, received on her officially sanctioned BlackBerry. Remember Blackberries? No? You weren't alone, gave cause for concern in the limited but comfortable life of the girl now known as the sound a cat makes choking on a hairball. Hedgewish read and reread her boss's simple message and sagged deeper into despair. Girl on the other side of her desk, a welcome distraction. Miss Junior Administrator? Did I do something wrong? Sorry, lost focus. Where were we? Name, date of birth, date of contract. Still missing the fun stuff, wish and powers and whatnot. In a city of 106 magical girls, with the addition of this runty chick, 107, you gotta have bookkeeping. As junior administrator, Hedgewish took vital statistics for all inductees, assigned them a platoon, and kicked them into military life. She scrutinized her current specimen, too meek. At 13 meekness can be beaten out of you, and in Chicago beating was what you got, but chips flipped against a month's survival. After the relevant questions, Hedgewish tossed her a portfolio with Imperial Dogma and living quarters. Next head across the sidewalk to the medical building. You a virgin? The girl blinked. What's a? Good answer. Expect to be asked again. The girl nodded, took a timid step toward the exit, reconsidered and stooped her head in a half bow. Eyes shut, arms straight down her front with the portfolio clutched. Thank you, Miss Hedgewish. I was so scared. There was a magical girl in the city I came from, she said I better leave or she'd submit your praises to our munificent Empress, from whom issues the cornucopia of your salvation. Hedgewish extended a sharp and straight arm that terminated with a clean snap of the fingers toward an office wall consumed by a neoclassical portrait of the holy and exalted Empress of Greater Chicago, a sheer and austere woman, swept in opulent robes with ermine trim, posed mid-step, eyes raised toward a penitent heaven. In one upturned palm a golden bowl and the other a luminous mirror within which was reflected her own serious eyes now turned toward the viewer. She presided upon a vibrant sunrise backdrop, and flamed with a yellow luster. This image hung, by mandate, in every office and living quarters under the Empire's jurisdiction, Peoria to Sheboygan. Hedgewish, one of the few girls who had met the Empress in person, found the portrait disconcertingly realistic. The newcomer bowed toward it. Thank you, why your munificence. Then she departed toward medical. The office lay stagnant, Hedgewish stagnant within it. A whoosh deflated her lungs, her legs slid deeper under her desk as her head dragged down the back of her chair and she bubbled around the floor like a vat of goo. Her hand fell upon her BlackBerry. She reread the message. The Empress summons you to council with centurions DuPage and Cicero. Fuck. Fuck. To a layperson, it doesn't sound so bad. Office jockeys attend stupid meetings all the time. Fact of life, suck it up. But nobody except Hedwig had to attend meetings with these fucking bozos. She loved their dumb title, centurions. What Latinate bullshit. Cicero was acceptable. She could abide Cicero, whose rigid self-seriousness rarely extended beyond her own definite boundaries. But DuPage. Let's talk about DuPage, Hedwig gesticulated in her empty office to an absent audience. There's only one thing anyone needs to know about DuPage. It's a county, you see, a weird little square smack in the center of the herpes blister, slowly swelling on the lower lip of Lake Michigan, a banal second-level federal subdivision of little note. Everyone in Chicago pronounces this county exactly the way it looks, DuPage. Simple, no? But Centurion DuPage insisted, upon an alternate pronunciation. DuPage. Like it was French. Hedwig wished she could give her own name an alternate pronunciation. This whole city was stuffed with stupid things. Dumb dumb dumb, stupid stupid dumb, dumb stupid dumb, fuck fuck fuck. Fuck. The caller expelled out her mouth. This is why everyone should have a fuck bag. It really makes you feel better when you can go apeshit over the dumbest things and nobody has to listen. Don't foist your problems on other people. As long as you do that, nobody can hate you. Moments later, Cicero's lieutenant called. They had arrived. Fuck. Hedwig sprinted out the office, out the front door, into the howling gale and down the slippery sidewalk to the roundabout. Her feet went out from under her, she landed on her ass and bounced halfway down the walkway until she lurched back upright. It wasn't just one car in the roundabout, it was 5. Doors opened and an entire platoon of magical girls shivered into the snow. They wore white suits. Hedwig wore a white suit under her jacket. White suits were the thing to wear, because they were formally mandated by decree of the Empress. Hedwig hated white suits, they made her want to barf. Like this, BLEUUUGH. Centurion Cicero. From the height of the walkway she saluted. She had to tow her way downhill to avoid an embarrassment. Glory be to God for your safe return. Was your mission a success? Unequivocal, said Centurion Cicero, who towered. Aided by her lieutenant, she rose from the back seat of the foremost car. 4 days prior, she and her goon squad of 19 magical girls embarked on a top-secret objective above even Hedwig's clearance. And will all of your subordinates attend this assembly? My apologies, Lady Cicero, but I do not believe they will fit in the council chamber. Cicero allowed her lieutenant to drape a fur coat over her shoulders as she strode up the walkway toward the administration building. Hedwig, who had already gained downward momentum on the slippery slope, nearly fell trying to redirect herself and wound up following several steps behind. During the mission, Cicero said, we encountered bizarre magical phenomena. I believe it prudent for the Puella Magi under my command to receive a full medical examination before they resume ordinary duties. Astute judgment, Lady Cicero. Hedwig felt sorry for the girls under Cicero's command. When they reached the top of the walkway, Cicero turned on a sharp heel and pointed at her goons shambling below. Lombard, organize 5 Puella Magi at your discretion and transport the spoils into the administration building. Elmhurst, shepherd all others to the medical building and inform the physician of our purpose. The signified goons barked smart yes miladies. Spoils, Lady Cicero, said Hedwig. Shall I open storage for you? Yes. Have the others arrived? others. Plural. The centurions often forced one to surmise what they meant.
According to my information, the second and fourth centurions will not attend this meeting. It will be only you and Centurion DuPage, who has not yet arrived.
Typical, said Cicero. Although Hedgewish had only been told she was summoned to the meeting, as junior administrator she essentially doubled as hostess. She showed Cicero and her lieutenant to the council chamber and bid them make themselves comfortable, then ran to the basement and scanned her keycard for the goons who filed downstairs carting heavy-looking crates. Hedgewish figured they were munitions. But Cicero's goons corrected her, "It's grief cubes." Grief cubes. Holy shit. Grief cubes were the size of a 6-sided die. There had to be thousands, possibly tens of thousands in the crates, more than the city of Chicago harvested in 6 months. After she dismissed the goons and locked up, she went upstairs and heard shouting from the council chamber.
"You hobgoblin, I ordered you to pick me up, but did you? No. You deliberately ignored me. My lieutenant had to scrape ice off the windows before we could drive. This is an affront to my dignity as one of the Holy Order of Greater Chicago's 4 centurions, and may I remind you, the greatest of those 4, which makes it an affront to our glory the Empress herself, which may I remind you is blasphemous, and ought to be disciplined instantaneously, my dear Cicero, do you hear me?"
Oh God! Hedgewish braced herself and opened the door. Cicero had taken a seat near the monitor, her lieutenant stood behind her. Over the opposite end of the table leaned DuPage, hands splayed, her sallow grey face as close to Cicero's as possible.
"I apologize."
Not a hint of perturbation in Cicero.
"I was under strict orders to bring my spoils as swiftly as possible. I could not spare the detour. You may ask the Empress if you disagree with my conduct."
DuPage's gaunt body trembled. Her brittle black bangs cascaded over her eyes and she blew them back with a harsh exhalation of air. She whirled on Hedgewish.
"And you? Where were you when I arrived? Because my dear colleague Cicero brought so many clod-walloping vehicles and clogged the whole roundabout, I had to park especially far away with no escort. Have you shirked your duties, junior administrator?"
Hedgewish smiled, eyes wide, certain of impending death. But Cicero said,
"I ordered her to open storage for my soldiers, DuPage. The security of the tribute I have brought to Chicago far outweighs. You are below me in rank, Cicero, and you will act as such. Just because you got yourself a promotion to 3rd centurion doesn't make you an iota more significant than the sniveling recruit I used to pummel to submission, do you comprehend?"
Can one vomit so much they die? Cicero rose.
"You may outrank me, but not so much to treat me as your stooge."
The respective lieutenants of each centurion rushed forward, murmured miladies, and sought to mollify. Cicero retook her seat and DuPage turned away with crossed arms and a grimace.
"And the other 2?
DuPage said to Hedgewish.
"How long must I wait for my fellows to join?" "By decree of Her Munificence the Empress, the 2nd and 4th centurions will not attend this meeting."
She had anticipated this exact question, after Cicero asked it first. So while she waited for Cicero's goons to ferry the grief cubes, she had messaged her boss for more intel.
"Lady Cook has an important mission and Lady Joliet must study for an academic examination."
The entire right side of DuPage's face twitched, her dark eyes burned. She kneaded her necktie, ruffling her already ruffled white suit, which clung to her 2-dimensional physique at odd points. She whispered, "So I've been summoned into the cold at this mug-doubling hour, forced to dress for a formal engagement, while Lady Joliet remains warm and comfortable as she studies for an examination. The day after Christmas, when nobody is in school,
Milady,
said DuPage's lieutenant.
You know the Empress prioritizes Lady Juliet's studies highly. Please avoid another fiasco.
DuPage shot a hooked claw toward her lieutenant's face, and for a moment Hedgewish expected her to take the whole head off. But her fingers stopped inches from the eyes, and her lieutenant did not even blink, like this was an everyday occurrence, which it probably was. The trembling fingers remained bared for some time before DuPage lowered her arm and took her seat, and all the pent-up air in Hedgewish's lungs whooshed out. She had survived the easy part. Now the meeting began. Hedgewish raised a remote. The dual monitors at the end of the council chamber activated and a call patched to the Empress's estate. Everyone fell silent. 5 seconds passed, 10. DuPage's lieutenant brushed snowflakes off her superior's shoulder. Hedgewish took a new breath and held it. The call connected. The screen displayed a woman's face.
Good evening, Mesdames,
said the chief handmaiden of the Empress.
Your appointment will proceed as scheduled pending a shift in humor in Her Munificence. I will contact Her Munificence now. Thank you, Chief Handmaiden.
The chief handmaiden typed into a keyboard. Everyone waited until she said,
Her Munificence has reaffirmed her offer of appointment, Mesdames. I shall transmit you to her shortly. Thank you, Chief Handmaiden.
The screen went black. It symbolized the void of despair one tumbled into when one had no choice but to commune with Her Munificence, the Holy Empress of Greater Chicago, Milwaukee, and affiliated territorial acquisitions. Hedgewish sought inner peace. The screen displayed a chamber. A study in a mansion, lined with tall bookshelves between which antique paintings hung, pious Renaissance scenes. A solitary candle illumined a tall-backed velvet chair turned away from the camera. Only an arm on the rest denoted the presence of Her Munificence. The arm raised, its hand turned the page of a book. A grandfather clock ticked.
Welcome, DuPage. Cicero. Thank you for the honor of this communication, Your Munificence.
DuPage and Cicero said in uncharacteristic but mandated tandem.
Cicero,
said the Empress.
Didst thou complete thine assigned text?
Hear that? Didst thou? Didst thou, didst thou, didst thou? Cicero bowed her head.
I have completed the chapters on reason from DePizan's The Book of the City of Ladies, as you requested, Your Munificence. What are thine opinions? Opinions, Your Munificence?
Said Cicero. Leave it to the Empress to waste everyone's time with literary comprehension tests, and leave it to Cicero to give such a dumbfounded answer as though she had not expected it.
Indeed. I prefer my subjects to develop opinions upon the works I assign. I little need those who absorb information without metastasizing it within their psyche.
Metastasizing? Like cancer?
My opinion,
Cicero said.
My opinion is that reason is. Thou lackst eloquence. My opinion is that reason is the foundation of a flawed society.
The hand on the screen turned a page in its book. Cicero had no idea, not the slightest, everyone could tell. That's what happens when you give a girl who dropped out of school at 13 a tome 5 centuries old and ask their opinion on it.
Is that truly thine opinion, Cicero? Or didst thou simply parrot the edification I bestowed upon thee in our prior correspondence? For DePizan herself believed reason to be the cornerstone virtue of society, and the virtue by which she could convince the male elite of her time of woman's worth. But it's to be expected of one whose sources stemmed primarily from the pagan and polytheistic The author's comprehension of reason was informed by some of mankind's greatest philosophers, and upon it she had the strongest grasp. Thus, she chose it as the allegorical foundation for her utopian female society. But this error allowed a venom into her city of ladies.
Hedwig had read the book they gabbed about. The Empress forced her. An obscure Renaissance text by a female writer. The book was little more than a collection of episodes from mythology, history, and religion that exemplified the value of women. The virtues of reason, rectitude, and justice upon which the Empress harped so much were no more than the titles of chapters. The whole thing was drivel, a treatise that strove only to prove that women were at least subhuman in a time when men treated them as chattel. A useless work 500 years later, which was why nobody but the Empress had ever heard of it. A drivel text for a drivel philosophy.
Then it is rectitude,
said Cicero.
If not reason, it must be rectitude upon which we must found our society. Rectitude, the virtue that defines the actions of God.
God.
In essence, thou art correct,
said the Empress.
There is only one absolute truth in this world, and neither reason, the empirical, nor justice, the retributive, are truly absolute, they are founded upon the flawed perceptions of human beings. God's perception is infallible. However, one cannot simply found a society on rectitude. They first must comprehend rectitude. And because rectitude is based upon an understanding beyond our ken, this becomes the critical challenge of philosophy. After all, how can human understanding even seek to understand that which God understands?
The question stagnated in the silent air, uttered with a twinge of the rhetorical but with enough verbosity that nobody could be quite sure. DuPage glared at the tabletop with a murderous glint. The lieutenants did their best to remain composed. The Empress Mercy killed the silence.
We shall converse more on this topic in private, Cicero. For now, we shall progress to the next order of business. Cicero, hast thou completed thy mission?
All befuddlement vanished from Cicero. It was clear she had hoped for this question from the start.
Yes, your munificence. I have retrieved the tribute without a single casualty.
The book flipped shut. The grandfather clock ticked. The Empress did not rise from her chair or turn.
You have done well, Cicero.
Her voice was sedate, but she was clearly excited, considering she forgot the thou. She continued,
as the mission was a success, its purpose need no longer be concealed. I sent Cicero and her soldiers to Minneapolis. They were to conquer the city and acquire a large trove of energy located within its bounds. And despite some unforeseen complications, they have ultimately prevailed. The trove shall become the holy order of Greater Chicago's reserve, and with it we shall wage war on those who refute the rectitude of our law.
War. Woahoahoa, who said anything about war? What was this war? Before Hedwig had a chance to consider the grand idiocy of the word war, Centurion DuPage erupted from her long placidity and swept a rigid arm its full range of motion in a salute vaguely Hitler-esque. Her mouth curled into a grin and she spoke.
Yes. Verily, forsooth. Your munificence, long have I awaited this day that we, the great and infallible Empire of Chicago, strike back against those foolish and idle puella magi who infest the cities of the American nation. Your judgment and rationality, ineffable, inexorable.
She ratcheted upright, her chair toppled back, her arms lurched this way and that with operatic animation, her tie flapped against her shoulder as her body twisted and emoted.
Which city shall we crush first, your munificence? Which city shall bear witness to our power and our glory? Indianapolis? Detroit? Those heathens. Next, we shall conquer St. Louis,
said the Empress.
St. Louis, beautiful, a magnificent decision, your munificence, and your magnificence. That wretched slum, that hive of depravity, that sink of moral putrefaction.
She staggered toward the screen, spittle flared from her lips.
We shall grind their noses to powder beneath our boot soles. Thine initiative, as always, pleases me.
But DuPage was not done. Not even close.
I'll assemble my platoon instantaneously, I plead of your munificence, you simply must assign this task to me, I crave it, I starve for the glory, I salivate.
And no mere theatrics. Beneath DuPage's idiocy lurked a strain of intelligence, either intended or instinctual, like a dumb animal that intuits the correct route to migrate for winter. Given those present, DuPage was likely already the Empress's choice for the task, since Cicero had just returned from a dangerous assignment. Her jingoism undercut the Empress's authority but in a way perfectly conducive to the corporate culture. DuPage now seemed the mastermind, the Empress merely in agreement with her demands. Hedgewish loved moments like these subtle usurpations, they fed her a little life.
And sure enough, I have already decided that thou shalt endeavor this mission, DuPage. St. Louis is weakened, their chief PMMM intends to relocate and will travel to Denver 2 days from now. Our opportunity presents itself. We must act. Pa.
DuPage swirled in a dervish, she teetered but did not fall.
I'd rather slaughter the lot of them with their leader, not defang a headless snake. Is our empire so cowardly to rely on such so-called opportunities? Is our might not such that we cannot create our own opportunities?
Uh-oh. DuPage pushing her limits tonight.
DuPage. Still thy tongue. Overconfidence leads to irony, our might is no excuse to forego intelligent tactics. Assemble thy platoon. March at once upon St. Louis. Convert those thou canst, cast aside those thou cannot. Apologies, your munificence.
DuPage settled at the rebuke, her body swiveled to a halt, she knelt and bowed her head.
I of course would never question your judgment. However, allow me one question, St. Louis is the prologue to a much larger conflict, is it not? Our holy order shall not cease until all PMMM are united under our banner and code. Not until we have brought our light to all. Yes, correct, well spoken your munificence. Well spoken indeed. Now with that in mind, and I make this next statement only because you told Cicero earlier that you prize subjects who develop their own opinions, do you not consider it wise to minimize the force we use against St. Louis? What do you mean?
Said the Empress.
I mean, and I'm merely thinking tactically here, in particular the tactics of resource management, essential to any armed conflict. I'm thinking that, although Cicero has indeed brought us a great surfeit of energy, and we can profit from that energy greatly, it would be best not to expend too much against such a low-hanging fruit as St. Louis, when much more challenging foes loom in our future. Cicero's entire platoon was dispatched 4 days on her mission, and in that time our soldiers at home struggled to harvest the full amount of energy our bountiful city provides. If I can guarantee success with far fewer soldiers than Cicero, it would aid our efforts in future engagements.
This smug little bitch. But now Hedgewish loved it, her smug bitchiness had turned against the only person worse than DuPage in the whole empire.
How many soldiers?
Said the Empress.
Myself and my lieutenant shall suffice.
DuPage remained bowed the entire time, the most humble posture of supplication.
Against 6, or is it 7, leaderless suburban girls in St. Louis? Surely, you have faith enough in my abilities? And, given my particular powers, sometimes a larger force is only a detriment to me.
Hedgewish didn't know what DuPage's particular powers entailed, she was only the junior administrator, such stuff was classified, but the Empress thought for some time.
Very well. Failure shall mean thy death, DuPage. Oh verily, verily.
DuPage grinned.
I insist only that one other accompany you. To ensure our Holy Order's code is adhered to at all times and that proper care is taken to avoid unneeded casualties.
The grin diminished. Which was fine, because when DuPage grinned she looked like a serial killer.
If you insist, I must agree. Hedgewish, thou shalt attend DuPage in her efforts against St. Louis.
Hedgewish plummeted. She landed on one knee, her head bowed, her eyes wide as they stared at the flat grey carpet.
Your will is my command, your munificence.
Kill her. Kill her now. Flay her ruined corpse until the skin comes off, then turn it into a tablecloth.
Hast thou more tactical suggestions, DuPage? Consider it only my unparalleled munificence that allowed your arguments such weight at all.
DuPage glanced Hedgewish over, eyes slanted, lower lip bitten, a dubious tilt of her head.
None further, your munificence. Then I have spoken. Cicero, remain in Chicago and await further orders. Yes, your munificence. Hedgewish, serve DuPage as your superior. Obey her commands. Yes, your munificence. Nothing further. Disperse.
The 5 people in the room pounded a fist against their chest and intoned together the standard farewell,
praise to your munificence.
Except Hedgewish kind of whispered it, the zeal of her compatriots more than swallowed her tepidity. The screen turned off. Cicero and her lieutenant exited without a word to DuPage. DuPage's lieutenant rushed to her superior's side and whispered harsh statements in her ear. DuPage waved her away with an expelled breath and a note of mockery.
Our orders are clear. I simply hope this worthless junior administrator is no undue burden. We depart tomorrow. Yes, Lady DuPage,
said Hedgewish. She rose in a daze, a fog of horror, a swollen growth in her stomach lining. Kill her. Eat her liver for dessert.
May God grant us good fortune in this endeavor.
The wind howled outside, the windows rattled. Hedgewish looked up at the clouds, then past them, into the dark storm air to the heavens where lurked a god she knew existed and wished didn't. But that god could do nothing to save her now. End of chapter. Chapter end.